Morning everyone. Just in case anyone missed yesterday's promo of a free posture assessment, I thought what I would do is I would use my trusty friend here to go through a little bit about posture just as a general overview for those of you that weren't able to be there. So first things first, there's this thing called the anatomical plumb line. So what that means essentially is that the ear is aligned with the shoulder, which is aligned with your hip, your knee, and your ankle. So it's this straight line throughout these structures here. So starting from the top, common things that you can see is a forward sitting head posture. So essentially people that sit like this, and what if you're looking at the alignment there, if you've got a head sitting forward, the ears are sitting forward to the shoulder, to the hip, to the knee, and so forth. So what you commonly find is that guys that have this kind of posture will get a lot of pain up the top of their shoulders and in their neck. Now this is not always the case, but very commonly these things will be associated together. This is the point where you come in, get an assessment, and a physiotherapist will give you some exercises to kind of strengthen the muscles around your neck and might do some strengthening up the top part of your shoulders and things like that there. So if you have a forward sitting head posture, another thing that could be contributing could be the upper part of your back. So these are the guys that, you know, it's commonly referred to as a hump, so to speak. So what that means is you're just getting what's called in fancy terms a thoracic kyphosis, or an abnormal curvature of the upper part of the back. So it's normal to have a level of curve through your neck, which usually curves a little bit inwards, then through your back, which usually curves a little bit outwards, and then it dips back in again towards the lower part of the back and curls around towards your tailbone there. So what can actually happen though is over time with bad postural habits, with other certain conditions, this can start to adopt an exaggerated curvature, which is a little bit more curved in the upper part of the back. Again, contributing to where this head position ends up, because if this is curved, your head naturally ends up more forward. So it might not mean that it's really your neck at all. It might be that it's mainly your upper back with a little bit of neck that's come as a result from that. So always worth getting an assessment if you are feeling like you've got any pains or niggles, just so that you can have the exact problem isolated on what it is. So coming forward from here, you can get this rolled shoulder effect as well. So if we're coming down to the shoulders now, this forward sitting shoulder posture. So these are the guys that everything's pretty good and you end up with something like this. This can happen for so many different reasons. You can get, if you're working in the gym and you're only ever working chest, it can naturally start to pull your shoulders in. Or if your pecs or your chest muscles are overactive, that can do that too. But it can also mean that there could be an underactivity or a lack of work on the muscles that are in between your shoulder blades here. So these are things like your rhomboids and other muscles that contribute. So they help to hold everything back. So often what you'll find is that the front will be tight and the back will be weak. So usually the muscles are really great like this. They are coupled in, one will do a main movement, the other will do the opposite movement. So it's called an agonist-antagonist coupling. So what that means is if one is tight, the other generally is stretched. If one is strong, the other can be weak. And that's not applicable if you work all the muscles the right way. And obviously everything is going to be strong and it just works in different ways. But if you're focusing on one and not the other, you can get that imbalance there. It can also be just a postural thing. People just get used to sitting forward without bringing themselves back, and the body adopts that position, and that over time will start to shorten these muscles and weaken these muscles. So we've spoken about the shoulder in terms of the anatomical plumb line. You can also get the opposite effect too, where you'll get these really far back postures there where the spine actually ends up flattening. So you can get a flattening of the spine. And there's a couple of different conditions that can contribute to that one there. So what that would mean is that sometimes the spine can stiffen and it reduces the body's ability to move. It's amazing how every part of the body is interconnected, and when you have one that's stiff or tight or anything like that, how it can have an influence on an entire complex of muscles, the skeletal system, so forth and so on. So what we're having a look at here is you can get a flattening of the spine, you can get an overcurvature of the spine. Coming down here to the lumbar spine, or the lower part of your spine before it joins to your pelvis. So you're looking at these last 5 vertebrae or sections of the spine. You can get a couple of different things that happen with that one. You can get what's called a hyperlordosis. So you get this exaggerated curvature here. And what that can mean is you've got some tight muscles here. Because your pelvis ends up tilting forward, so you get an anterior or a forward pelvic tilt. And these muscles here can also get tight. So you've got the muscles in your thigh and some other deeper muscles that actually come and attach up onto your pelvis. And if they become tight, it can pull your pelvis forward and it has an impact on the lower part of your back. So lower back pain can be so many different things. It can be pelvic tilt. It can be reduced core strength. So if you get this kind of position, your core, which is here, is obviously a little bit more on stretch. So when you strengthen that, it helps to bring back. And it can also mean that you've got something happening in the actual spine itself. So we went through the ergonomic video a little while ago, and if you wanted to know more about ergonomics, that video is available for you as well. About sitting posture. So often when people say sit up, they'll sit with an exaggerated curvature. Now this isn't always the case, but I have seen it on occasion with a few people. So rather than sitting up, you can sit tall, which tends to make you feel like you want to sit upright more than something like this. Over time, your brain starts to map, okay, this is where my body needs to be, and it starts to develop that as its normal. So if you constantly working on your position, eventually what the brain will do is it will go, okay, that's where you want me to be. And it will start to activate the right muscles and release the right muscles to give you a nice spinal position. So sometimes that means that you'll have to work on certain muscles for a little bit, and sometimes that means that it's just simply you're correcting how you're sitting and all those bits and pieces there. So, exaggerated lordosis, you can kind of see that. Often you'll see that with big bellies. So with your pregnancy, that can happen as well, which is why often pregnant women can experience some lower back pain, and also with men that have a little bit of weight around their tummy there. Often that's where men will put their weight, and if you get a bit of a beer belly, that can also pull forward and put more stress on your back. The other contributing factor to that is we have this thing called your center of gravity. So that's a whole different video there, but what that is it's basically a spot in the middle of the largest part of your mass that sits within what's called your base of support. So your base of support is, if we take my friend here, your contact with the ground and the space in between your feet. So this is why you'll feel more stable if you put your feet wider, because you've got a greater base of support. And if you bring your feet closer together, you may feel a little less stable. If you don't really feel much like that, your balance is pretty good. But if you go on one foot, it will feel a little bit more of a challenge because your base of support has become smaller. So your area of contact with the ground and that space in between both your feet has become smaller, obviously, because you've only got one foot on the ground at this point. So why am I talking about center of gravity and base of support? Well, if you bring, currently my center of gravity sits in here. If I had a tummy out here, it brings it to there. What that does is it actually, a little bit of physics here for everyone, it actually increases the length between the spine and your center of gravity and the point of the end there. And that's called your lever arm. When that is longer, it puts more stress through your back. Due to the forces, it increases what's called torque. So it increases the forces around your spine, which is why it's harder to lift something out here than it is to keep it close, and why it reduces your risk of injury to keep things close to your body when you're lifting. Again, a whole different video. But, so you can get an exaggerated lumbar lordosis. You can also get a flattened lumbar lordosis. So both of those will contribute to stiffness in the spine. Then you can have changes in your pelvic position, obviously. You can have a tilt of your pelvis that is too far back. So you see people splay like this. Or you can have one that's too far forward, which can adopt this posture, which can also be contributed to by weak glutes, or it can adopt that posture there. So when your body ends up in a position other than what it was, other than in alignment with its anatomical plumb line, it has to find the slack somewhere. So it tends to change something around it. And what I mean by that is if your pelvis is tilted forward or backwards, it's either going to change your spine or your knees, or it might change both. Just depends on the person, and everyone is completely different in how they present. And again, you can do, if you have, for example, have had a hip replacement or something happening with your hip, what that will do is that can load and change the position of where you're loading your hip and your lower limb. And what that can do is start to overload the other side, which can cause these pains. And you're like, well, I got my right hip replaced, but I'm getting pain in my left side. Why is that the case? It's because you're starting to overload on that left side. Or it could mean that you've also got something happening on the left side, in which case it's always worth getting that checked. Same thing, if you've got a sore knee, you're going to be loading that, and sometimes you might find that people, they've got a sore knee, will hold it in a bent position, which again moves it out of that anatomical plumb line and changes how everything is loaded. Same thing with ankles and feet. So that is very brief overview of posture. It is incredible how all these things link in, and how something as simple as posture can affect how your body's loaded and can affect whether or not you are experiencing pain. So I hope that helps. Obviously, seeing a physiotherapist, if you have any of these things happening, is always worth it, just to make sure that everything's going okay and to give you some exercises that you can work on. There are so many different exercises that's a combination usually of stretching, strengthening, myofascial release, aka release of the muscle, and all those bits and pieces. So usually what you'll find is when you're looking at postural exercises, I always like to focus on muscular endurance, so the endurance of the muscle to hold itself in a position. I find that sometimes it's really great to strengthen the muscles, but sometimes they'll just be strong for a period of time. And things that we do that involve our posture on a daily basis, sitting at a computer, linking with your ergonomics, if you're in one of those trade type positions and you're constantly lifting and doing all these bits and pieces, it requires your muscles to be able to engage over a period of time, which is when you're starting to look at your endurance. So it's always nice to strengthen the muscles, although it might be more appropriate to strengthen those muscles over a period of time, so more of your holds and things like that. Specific exercises, that would be completely dependent on what is happening with you. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me anything. You can go on my Facebook page, Soldier on Physiotherapy. Feel weird just doing a little shout out for my business in terms of that, but it's mainly just a contact point that if you wanted to ask me anything or you wanted to book an appointment or anything like that for further information, that is available to you. I hope that you all have an amazing day and that this video has been helpful, and there's more to come at some stage. All right, bye everyone.
Have a good day.